Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today I will be reviewing Clyde Fans by SETH. I have not read too many SETH works. I've read very recently Wimbledon Green, which I enjoyed a lot. I thought it was really fun, and I thought, oh, maybe this will end up on my top 10 graphic novels of the year, because it was really just like it was one of those types of books that wasn't super serious in any way. Like, it was very comical. It's about like the world's greatest comic book collector, Wimbledon Green, and it's full of just all these really silly characters that are kind of poking fun at collector culture, and like the rivalries that spring up in there, like the collectors who are very insular and like constantly at odds with each other because they're all trying to one up each other, um but in a very like silly or cartoonish way. And I appreciated that. It was like, okay, there's nothing like super heavy about this. Clyde Fans is the complete opposite of that, and it is beautiful, and it is moving, and it is a masterpiece. This is an early frontrunner for probably not just my favorite comic of the year, but maybe just like my favorite thing I'm going to read this year, period. I think it's going to be very hard to top. Still early, but we'll see. So what is Clyde Fans about? Clyde Fans, well, first of all, it was published originally, it was serialized in SETH's series Palookaville. I think it started in Palookaville 10, and then it ran until Palookaville 23, and I think it took like 20 years for that to actually be finished. Some crazy high number like that. And I'm glad that I didn't have to read it in real time. And actually, at my local comic shop at JHU in Staten Island, the owners, they recommended this book, but they said like it was a real struggle because I was reading it as it was coming out, and it was so frustrating to have to wait like a year or two between installations. So really good. I don't have to put up with that. I just have the full complete thing here from Drawn and Quarterly, and you have that same luxury, just picking up this single collection of it. Clyde Fans is the story of two brothers, Abe and Simon Matchcard. They are polar opposites of each other. Abe is an extrovert, and Simon is an extreme introvert. They are deeply flawed in a variety of ways. Abe is a very quick to anger person, very judgmental person. Simon is skittish and doesn't see the outside world as real. Everything feels like it's fake to him. The only thing that's real to him is his room, his home, just like where he gets to, just sit quietly and read and enjoy his knickknacks and collectibles and just be away from everybody else and hang out with his mom. But that one thing about both of them is that they are both alone. They are both lonely type of people, and they're running this family business, Clyde Fans, that was started by their father, and their father ran out on the family when they were not like kids, but many years ago. So it is a story of familial tension. The brothers do not get along. Abe pushes Simon around. Simon doesn't often stand up for himself. The book is told in 5 parts, each corresponding to a different year. So a different year in the brothers' lives and in the life cycle of their business. And each section reveals more about their past and why they are the way they are, and just informs the relationship and contextualizes it more. But at the same time, it's not just about these brothers. It's also about the passage of time. Like, each section is about a different period of time, but Simon in particular, his entire, really dramatic drive forward is the rumination on the passage of time and how we sometimes wish we can pause it and we could stop and live in like a perfect moment of peace and tranquility. Or, how we can sometimes get lost in our minds and think that time isn't passing. Like, I'm just like, what, right now, I am as young as I was 10 years ago. I still think of myself as a high school student sometimes. And then once in a while, you catch a look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh, I am old. I am older, at least. And I imagine this is the kind of story, the kind of book that's just going to get more and more impactful the older I get, and the later in life you read it. There are some passages in here that genuinely really almost move me to tears, and I imagine when I get a little older, they probably will succeed. There is a really great sequence where Simon is taking care of his mother, who is experiencing dementia from Alzheimer's, and Abe, who doesn't take care of the mom at all, bullies him into committing her to a retirement home to be taken care of. And just the sequence of like getting in the car and Simon and his mom sitting together in the car, getting to the home, sitting together there, and them just like interacting and talking a little bit. It's beautiful and it's heartbreaking. And it gives you a lot to think about and to ruminate on in your own life. And that's one of the strengths of the book, is it gives you time to think. A lot of the times with comics, the goal is to move as quickly as possible through it. And usually that's what I want. I want a comic that can be read quickly. If I wanted to spend a minute on each page, I would read a book. But if when I'm reading a comic, the pacing is very important. Let's keep things moving. And what that means is usually you don't have panels in comic books where nothing happens. You might have one or two that are establishing a setting or maybe a general tone, but then every subsequent panel is action. Something is progressing the story forward. There is a lot of quote unquote dead air in Clyde fans. There is a lot of time to just amble through the landscape. We see a lot of just still images of buildings that are just sitting in the sunrise or the sunset. And just like, here's one building, here's another. And it feels like you are taking a little stroll through this town. And it's very relaxing and it's very melancholy. It's the whole book, I would say, is imbued with a melancholic nostalgia because it's so steeped in time and the passage of it, and that feeling of time slipping away. And it's beautiful, and you don't get that from most comics. One of the most memorable sequences is kind of the very first one. In part one, we see over the course of, I think, 3 pages, we just see the sunrise like come over this town. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 pages of just the sun peeking above the buildings and the color palette changing from black and blue to white and blue, as just the color or the light creeps in. That's another thing about the book that adds to its kind of somber, melancholy tone, is that the only colors are black and blue. And the minimalism of the color gives it the perspective of like you're looking at the past through a lens. If it was full of color, it would feel more present. It would feel like this is something that's currently happening, but it kind of gives it the idea of like when you're having a memory and things are vague, things are not quite in focus or clear, that color fades out. And that's just going to get stronger and stronger the older this book gets, the older that the reader gets. So it's really, it's beautiful. It's brilliant. And aside from just the familial tension, aside from the passage of time and the thinking about that, this is also a book about capitalism in a way. Like their family business, we see how it kind of operates, and we see how salesmen operate in the 50s and the way business was done at that time. And we see the inevitable downfall of that. We kind of see how 20th century capitalism was doomed to fail for most of these, small businesses, and the way that they do business. It's not sustainable. There's always going to be the next wave that pushes out the old, and it's just like that cycle feels like it can't be beaten. So there's a lot to Clyde Fan, and I just think that it's a really special book. I think this is one that when I think about one day having to purge my collection of only the essentials, this to me feels like an essential. This is something that I would keep forever. It hits that emotional resonance with me the same way that like a Ray Bradbury book does, like Dandelion Wine, very much like that. So if that appeals to you, if you're a Ray Bradbury fan, then you would probably really like this book. If in terms of comics, equating it to someone else, it gave me the vibes of like Adrian Tomina. So if you like his work, I think you would really like this. In terms of the art and the style of it, I think if you're a fan of Chris Ware, you'll probably dig it because it's got the kind of the precision of a Chris Ware work. But I think this is a bit easier to read than that. It's not as chaotic as a Chris Ware book. It's square panels, and sometimes you do have a lot of panels per page, but it still reads pretty quickly. You're not gonna, even though the mood here is one of take your time, be patient, relax, you don't lose hours and hours of your day having to read this. You can read this fairly quickly. It does move at a really good pace, but it benefits from you allowing yourself to enter the mind of Simon in particular and sit with it and think about it and just be present in the moment. So can't recommend Clyde Fans enough. I give this an arbitrary and subjective grade of 10 out of 10. I recommend it to everybody, comic reader or non-comic reader alike. I think this is just a beautiful, beautiful book. Let me know if you've read Clyde Fans and your thoughts on it in the comments below. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.